Thanks for sticking around with us tonight. The next portion of our meeting is to discuss our Basin Road Stormwater Retrofit project. This is just a project update. There's no requirement by DEP that we take public comment, just simply to update the residents about the project. We have Art and Tracy from AKRF, the design engineers for the project, and they'll be leading us through the project update. We're at about 30%, I think, with the project.
Okay, we're in the 30% design phase.
Very good, excellent. Okay, I'll turn it over to Art and Tracy.
Thank you, Casey. Again, I'm Art, and this is Tracy. I'm a water resources engineer with AKRF. Tracy is a landscape architect. Our office is in Center City, and we're working with the township on this Basin Road Stormwater Retrofit project, which is an example of an implementation project that would fit under the township's TMDL and pollutant reduction plan. Can everybody hear me okay? Is the mic on?
Good.
Okay, is this better? Okay, thank you. Okay, so today we're just going to run through a little bit about the project's location, what the existing conditions of the site are, the goals of the project, the funding breakdown of how we're going to implement this project, some of the stakeholders involved, local watershed groups, the county. We're going to get into a little bit of the technical details about the design elements that we're looking at doing. I'm going to give some examples of these design elements that we've implemented on some other of our projects, and we'll wrap it up with a look at the project schedule. So, as many of you may be familiar with, this is the Basin Road site is within the Stony Brook development that's south of Westchester Pike there, cutting across the top here, and we're coming off of 5 Points Road, which is right down here. The Stony Brook development was designed around the early to of which about 74 acres were counted in the treatment calculations when the basin and the development were designed. So a look at the basin, it is so on township open space, it's about a 2-acre tract. The wetland pond itself is about half an acre or less. Again, it was built in the mid-70s to control runoff from this 74-acre development. The basin itself was designed under an old set of design standards, which mainly meant that it was there to control the extreme flood events that looked at what the pre-existing conditions were from undeveloped land, and then they were coming in, they're developing it, putting in homes and streets, and they were required to control the stormwater runoff back to that pre-existing condition, but they were only looking at, like I said, the major large flood events, the 50-year storm, the 100-year storm, without much thought into what happens under a more frequent storm, like a summer thunderstorm that dumps an inch instead of a 100-year storm that might dump about 6 or 7 inches. So what we see in the basin is there's some widespread invasive plant growth. So you don't have a terribly diverse plant community there. There's a permanent pool within the basin that actually wasn't designed that way. Here's a shot of the big concrete outlet structure and it's a site that appears to maybe get some kids hanging out after school. There's some bike trails, some graffiti. It's pretty well hidden, and this right here, what you're looking at is a roughly 6 foot diameter metal riser with a rack, like a trash grate on the top. There's a lot of debris that's built up around this outlet structure, and it was designed originally with a horizontal pipe coming out that when the basin would fill up, it would go out through that pipe, and that's been covered over with silt and trash and debris over all the years. Part of this site, this basin is kind of situated on a stream channel network on this township open space tract. So this channel is a tributary to the East Branch Chester Creek. First order, that means it's the highest stream up in the watershed. It only feeds into other creeks downstream. It doesn't receive, like there's not a junction or a confluence of another stream dumping into it. And the state the state has a designation, a designated use for this creek, which they call a Chapter 93 designation, which is a measure of just how the quality of water quality within the creek. And so this thing is designated as a trout stocking fishery and migratory fishery. It's not a terribly high quality stream network. And as you can see, there's a lot of severely eroded, there's bank segments that are near vertical, and the banks are about 3, 4, 5 feet high, and you can see this up and down the stream channels, both upstream and downstream of the basin. So some of the goals of the project were to enhance the performance of the basin with regards to how it treats, detains, and releases stormwater. A major project goal that fits into the TMDL and PRP is to trap pollutants like sediment and nutrients and treat them. We're also looking at trying to repair and stabilize those actively eroding stream banks. We'd like to get some more diverse and high quality habitat in there, from wetlands, riparian, which means the area just next to the stream channel, and the uplands that are more drier areas. We also like to try to introduce some means of some passive recreation and education. This is being looked at as a demonstration project. Again, this is one of the township's 4 publicly owned basins, and we, as you'll see, the stakeholders like the county and the watershed groups would like to see this as a demonstration that we can do some of these techniques on some of the other township basins, as well as to get an opportunity for the public to not to be seen as some kind of hidden place where you just have graffiti scrawled around. We'd like to make it a beautiful place to be at. Maybe put some signage in that explains, here we put in some plants that are native, and it creates some kind of habitat for birds and insects. So the funding breakdown, AKRF applied for a Growing Greener grant from the state and DEP for almost $300,000, and township is putting in just short of $450,000. That brings our total project cost to $745,000. Some of those key stakeholders I talked about, the Villanova Urban Stormwater Partnership. I'm a Villanova grad, and I know that they have a vested interest in getting more publicly available information about how to build these basins, how to retrofit them, and bring them up to current standards. There's been some support from Chester Ridley Crum Watershed Association and the Chester County Conservation District. And all of these groups have written letters of endorsement that we included with the grant, and they're pledging their support, they're pledging their input in terms of looking at the design that we'll be looking at how we can input to the monitoring plan. So monitoring in this context is we're looking at the conditions of the stream, and it's a measure of when the stream is high quality, you would tend to find some different kinds of insects that live within stream channel sediments. And so we'll be looking at what the conditions are before the project goes in and after to see just how well we're doing. And again, they're also looking to help us create some interpretive signage that we might put in on the site, around the site. So here we have a concept plan that we just recently updated. An older version of this plan was included with our grant application. So this group of, I'm going to direct your attention to some of these call-outs in the blue boxes. We're going to go over on this slide some of the upgrading to the structures within the system, as well as what we're going to do to the natural system. And it might be a little bit hard to read here, but the basin proper itself is this blue shape in the middle here. And what we'd like to do here is look at getting rid of some of those invasive plants and getting some native wetland plants established. That metal outlet structure is right there in the center, and one of the key things to do is look at how to redesign it or reconfigure it to perform the way a modern basin outlet structure would perform. So again, it would not only look at controlling the large flood events, the extreme floods, but it would look at those summer thunderstorms and making sure that those don't just pass right through and act as if has no control over those. Another big part of the project is a pre-treatment forebay, the little green oval that's sitting upstream of the basin. And the purpose of that's almost like a mini basin ahead of the standard basin. And that would let those sediments and the pollutants that ride along with those sediments drop out. It'll be like a little stilling basin, and that would drop out, and the township could go in and maintain it, and remove it, and ensure that those don't move downstream. Lastly, I'm going to bring up a little an analysis thing that we're doing on the stream banks downstream, and just to get everybody's orientation here, I should probably start it off that way. North is to the left of the screen here. This is Basin Drive. This is Sylvan Road, and we have two stream channels that come in from upstream. They meet at a confluence, and then they dump into the basin here. And there's this berm, this rather high berm that surrounds the basin, and this gray curved shape is this riprap emergency spillway that was designed with this basin and the stream channel. So this berm, the basin, was installed in line with the creek, and after passing through the big concrete graffiti outlet structure, it dumps into the stream channel and connects here. This is that tributary to East Branch Chester Creek. So the jet testing that we're doing, and Rick has seen this device that we have. Our company owns this device that we go out there and we hammer it into the stream banks, and it directs a jet of water onto the stream banks. It gives you an idea of how erodible the stream bank soils are. Well, why is that important? The reason it's important is when you undertake these retrofit projects, you actually might set up a condition that results in more erosion happening downstream of your basin. That might happen when, like I pointed out, when there's this big open pipe that was designed to just, the water enters the basin and passes through the pipe. If that comes through unabated and your soils are erodible enough, despite your best intentions, you might set up a condition where you're kind of throttling down flows by just a bit, but if that flow rate is putting more force on your stream soils over a longer amount of time, so let's say it's the peak flow coming in, everyone's familiar with the flow rate, 5,000 CFS, right? River flow rate. If that's coming in, if that was your pre-existing condition, and you have a regulation that's saying you need to bring that down to 4,000 CFS. Well, if you make it so your basin outlet's at 4,000 CFS, but over a longer amount of time than that 5,000 CFS spike, you might be eroding those sediments for a longer amount of time, if that makes sense. So we just want to make sure that what we're doing here isn't going to be counterintuitive. So it's a bit of a technical process, but we like to trot that out and show us how we can, want to be informed by good data, good field data that goes into a good design process. It's going to go right into how we reconfigure or redesign that big outlet structure. So the next group of design elements, this project contains stream bank stabilization projects that the previous presentation touched on a bit. So some of these, sorry about that. Too high. Some of the stream banks in the photos I show you were out here upstream of the site. So we want to look at ways to stabilize those, and I'll get into some of the design examples of how we might go about doing that. And right next to that big graffiti concrete outlet structure, some of the slopes around there have been eroded, compacted, or worn down by foot traffic. We want to look at that specifically as an area we're looking at stabilizing. And we might be looking at some other areas as the design goes further along. We might be looking at some of the areas downstream, although the conditions downstream are generally better than those upstream. Finally, some of the other sort of add-on features of the project have to do with maintenance access, pedestrian access. So this forebay, we're looking at doing just a gravel access road that connects to Basin Drive with a gate. And that would double as a means for people to come back in here if they so choose and check out the work we plan on doing on the banks and in the basin. And right now, I mean, this is an early concept plan, but we're thinking about running a trail along the top of the berm, perhaps an overlook onto the basin, interpretive signage here. And that trail we plan on connecting, it's wrapping next to the concrete outlet structure and out to that clearing, the opening right on Basin Drive. There's another element here. This green shape here is looking at some meadow restoration along the grass area that the township is maintaining. So again, that's a way of getting some native plant species in there. Good habitat for birds, bugs, bats, bees, all the bees. Sorry, bad pun. Okay, and I think that covers it. Covers most of it on this slide. Did I miss anything here, Tracy?
No, I just want to add to that. Has any of you been back there? Oh, okay.
I live on Silver.
So you live on it, right? So like when you go back in there, I mean, it has a potential to be like a little nature preserve. You know, it's. I mean, we saw evidence of, you know, bicyclists like building little courses back there and stuff, but it really, you know, once we improve the vegetation in there, it's going to have a whole different character to it. And you know, when I was out there, we did a vegetation survey, and you know, we basically documented as much of the vegetation as we could find. And there's this way of determining the quality of the habitat based on you know, what the ratio of native species to non-native invasives is. And then there are species have certain characteristics that make them what's considered conservative, which means that they have certain habitat requirements that indicate the quality of the habitat. So basically, when we did this analysis, we found that it's not a very high quality habitat. It doesn't have. There are I think about a third or almost half the species we documented were non-native in there. But there's a lot of bird activity. The days that we were out there, I could hear a lot of birds. I mean, this could be a great spot for birding. And so bringing a trail through there gives people access. I think we saw people walking dogs, and it could be a place where you go for an early morning run. So we're trying to leverage this as more than just a stormwater feature. It has the potential to be a better public natural space as well.
Just a quick question. Right now, I live right across the street from the access road. And when I look out, it's all trees. Now, is there going to be an area where those trees are taken down and this is opened up to be the basin? What is going to happen with a good portion of the trees that are right off the road? So it's like the road, there's the old basin, and then forest.
I think what you're talking about, from the road, what you see before the woods is that rock spillway.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then the berm goes up, and it's the berm that creates, the area for the basin. Mm-hmm. We are not proposing to remove any of the tree cover.
Okay.
So most of the enhancement is going to be on the inside. But we are trying to figure out, like, we've spent some time thinking about the spillway itself, and if there's a way to enhance it. It gets into a whole bunch of other technical issues about the way the spillway is designed and what it's supposed to do. So as a way of basically softening like what you see from the road so that you're not looking at this big linear strip of rocks, that's the idea of putting a meadow planting along the edge. So what you would see once it's developed is, a line of meadow. It would screen the rocks, and then behind it, as the berm comes up, then you have the trees behind it.
Yes, ma'am?
Who is going to be maintaining this once it's put in place?
Township staff. It's our basin, so we'll have to maintain it.
Because it would be a different kind of maintenance. And
Yeah.
currently, people are dumping there.
Right.
People that live right across from it are using the uneducated people that
Mhm.
won't leave their grass clippings on
Right,
the grass are dumping that over there, as well as and everything that comes out of their yard goes over there.
Right.
How would you prevent that? Once you
Ed-
do all this.
Education first and fines later, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, if we find anybody dumping on township property currently, we fine them immediately. And we can have them arrested for trespassing and everything else. So we'll start with the soft approach and then
Yeah, but because it could be a very,
it's going to be gorgeous. I have a question for the long-term residents who have been in the area. Rick and I were talking about this earlier. Has anybody ever seen that spillway in use, as we say? Have you ever seen water in that spillway? Because the thing is so crazy, over-designed, right?
Yes.
Have you ever seen water cascading through those big rocks, ever, in your lifetimes? Okay.
I've never seen enough water in that channel to back up against that spillway. More
Right.
likely it'd go around it.
Right.
Because the land all around it is lower.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay. I just wanted to ask you long-time residents, because we were discussing that earlier.
I do see water always along the shallow end.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like a giant mosquito something. So is that what you said it's not supposed to be that way?
Well, no, it's just so over-designed. It's built for like a 500-year storm. I mean, but we've even had 500-year storms. That's never. So I'm not sure how many. We'd have to get 13 inches of rain in like 3 hours for that spillway to be used.
Yeah, the upper end of the spillway is sitting 3 or 4 feet higher than the stream.
Right.
And it kind of tees into the stream at a 90-degree intersection. So all that water rushing downstream doesn't just get directed into it. It's got to round that curve. It's got to come to a certain high level before it can even start to lap over the top of that crest and start flowing down. So that the saturated conditions you're talking about are probably just rainfall falling directly over that swale and then ponding there.
Yes, giant pond all the time.
Just, yeah, that's right.
Thanks. It's a beautiful design, by the way. I have 2 questions. How long have you determined how long the water in the basin will stay there? Is it gonna, gonna eventually flow out, but how long is it gonna stay there? And the reason for that question is, again, referring back to you, is mosquitoes. Have you planned for, taking care of it, eliminating mosquito larva populations?
Yeah, so we're looking at designing it to the current DEP standards for constructed wetlands in terms of how long it's going to retain water and how long it takes to drain down. The mosquito concern, what we hope to do is that through the introduction of the native plants that are going to bring greater diversity of animals that tend to eat up mosquitoes, and specifically bats. Bats are great at eating up mosquitoes. We might think about just putting in some bat boxes to help encourage that. If there's any ponded water areas that we feel are mosquito problems, we'll look at, we'll see if we can control that. Again, that it doesn't have that outlet at the lowest elevations. That water has to reach the top of that metal, that round metal outlet structure, and so there's probably a good bit that just never drains down.
Is this project going as far as, I'm on Stony Brook Lane, the cul-de-sac, and on the other side is up in the circle. You have a stream that comes down. Is this project going that far, or nothing's going to be done to that area?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with where you're talking about. Is it on the other, like Sylvan or Basin Drive hooks up with?
I don't know. What would you say is that on there?
I would
There's
say
Silver
it's
Grove.
way to the left and somewhat below, the general. You had, there,
Yeah.
whoop. Okay, where are you there now?
Yeah,
Where
so-
would Stony Brook Lane be? Out in the circle.
That's a good question.
Where's 5 Point Road?
Just to the left.
Okay,
5 Points is
Road.
here.
Okay, right. Past Warren,
Yeah, there's one. You see Elton Circle? Or Stony?
Are you one of the cul-de-sacs that come here?
Stony Brook is just to your left.
Sure.
Yeah, Stony Brook comes to a dead end.
Right there, yeah.
Stony Brook's right there.
Okay. No, this doesn't extend that far. This is pretty much immediately around this point here at Sylvan and Basin. And that area that we had highlighted is only about 2 acres.
Now, where's the stream that comes through those two? There's a stream.
Yeah, it's
2 streams.
Yeah.
One of them is coming down here,
right
another
behind us,
one's
the circle.
coming off to the west here. and they join right within our project area.
Okay, so I would imagine that this is probably Stony Brook Lane.
Yep.
That's Stony Brook Lane. That's the
Yep.
cul-de-sac there. So nothing's, and then there's the stream. I guess that's the stream.
Yes.
Yes.
And out in the circle would be
Right there.
here.
Yep.
So I'm right here. Stream is here. So there's nothing going to be done over here.
No, that's
No.
outside of the project.
So it's not going to.
It's just upland woods, essentially,
Right.
off the project. So we
Okay.
wouldn't want to touch those.
I do know that where I'm at right there, someone could look at that. I guess there's a firewall or a storm wall there in the back there, and it's starting to clog up.
Okay, I'll send
I
it out right
don't know,
now.
maybe someone could dig it down to make sure. I mean, I think once a year, I think I've called before, but see, is there something that can be done with making sure that it runs off properly?
Yeah, we'll take a look. I'll send an email to Goldberg.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so just coming back to the design elements here on our concept plan, that's a rundown of the other elements that don't have to do with the basin retrofit or the stream bank stabilization. So here we're showing an example of what the stream bank stabilization might look like. This is this is a project called Gorgas Run, which is within the city. It was within the city of Philadelphia. It's Fairmount Park. This is a tributary to the Wissahickon Creek. And what we call this is an example of this sort of bioengineering that blends like hard armor. Whoa, there we go again with the arrow. Here we go. The hard armoring, that's the rock at the toe of the channel. This is stream channel right here. We put the rock down low because that's where the stream channel is most erosive. But just above that, we're rebuilding the bank. So you'd have to dig away some of the stream bank soils and rebuild it in these layers. And these layers are about 1 foot to 1.5 foot thick. They're wrapped in this coconut fabric, and they're filled in there with soil. They're compacted, and in between layers, we put these live whips. These are branches that are cut, live branches that are cut and shipped in like a saturated crate. I guess they're wrapped up in some kind of blanket or mat, and you put them in, and they make contact with the soils in the back. Here, this is about 5 feet deep from the face of the bank to where you stop the excavation. And so this gives you the best of both worlds with a bit of rock armoring at the toe for surety, and these really come in like gangbusters. These are dogwoods and willows, plants that love wetter environments, and these will come in and they'll root and they'll really, they're the weakest on day one. As these plants grow in, they get stronger and stronger, really hold that bank in.
The whole point of it is that the root systems of the plants are what naturally hold the soil together. And so that fabric is biodegradable. It lasts for 3 to 5 years. And by the time the fabric is decomposed, there'll be a whole new cover of shrubs and trees and herbaceous material on that bank. And you won't even see it. It'll just look like a regular bank again once it's done.
So this is an example of another constructed wetland retrofit that we did in Northeast Philly. This is the Pennypack Woods HOA. It's a rather large condo association that we help them to get some stormwater credit through the city. And this is kind of an example of that marsh or wetland that we designed, along with a shot of this rebuilt outlet structure. So it's going to have like a low-lying pool area surrounded by all these native grasses and shrubs and plants that love that kind of environment. Here's another shot of the wetland, the finished product, or wetland habitat. Where is this project at?
That's
Okay, it's another project in the city in Fairmount Park. So this is another retrofit of a basin, there was no basin here.
I don't think it was a basin. Well,
We intercepted. There's storm conveyance piping in this area, and we used some of the city open space to build up this wetland that treated the water, stormwater, before it went on downstream through those pipes. Just to wrap up here, the project schedule, we're underway here. We began collecting data, surveying the site, doing a soils investigation, measuring the stream bed, stream channel network. That started last fall. And that jet testing that I was starting to ramble on about, that we did that in the spring. The design phase is underway. We're under that 30% design phase, which is early preliminary design. We're underway here now. We'll be finishing that up and getting our DP permits sometime in the winter, about January or February. The project's going to go out to public bid in spring of 2018. Construction from summer through fall 2018. The water quality monitoring, that looking at the macroinvertebrates, those in-stream bugs. We just finished up the pre-existing conditions study within the last couple of weeks, and they'll be going back out there each year during the summer to take a look at how conditions are changing after the project goes in. And that it won't stop there with construction. Post-construction, we have to do an as-built survey just to make sure everything is built to spec. I believe those dates are wrong. That should be after the construction is complete. Adaptive management plan is just a document that'll help us help guide future decisions. If something should start to go astray, it'll set forth a plan on how to address that and bring it back to within design. We'll be working with the township on educational support, like putting in the signage and the other elements, and also working with the stakeholders. That'll be about spring of 2019. And our firm will be working with the township on the inspections 2019 and 2020, but I imagine that those would be ongoing well into the future beyond that. So, with that, are there any other questions for us on the project? Yes, ma'am?
Is this an exclusive native plant project? Are you using only native plants?
Yes.
This is just more of a random personal inquiry. When you're looking at native plants, is there consideration given to beneficial insects and how to attract them into these types of communities?
Well, typically, if you plant the right species, you'll get the insects and the birds and the other small animals. I mean, there's already a population of native invertebrates out there. And then there are definitely amphibians, probably reptiles. I'm sure if I went looking, I could find some snakes. So, yes.
And certain plant species are very attractive to butterflies, for example.
Yeah, dragonflies, native bee populations.
It's really the bees I was curious about.
The bees, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else?
Any more questions? Very good. Yes, ma'am.
It has a dog warning container bag.
Yeah, we'll
Are you gonna keep that?
oh yeah, we'll probably add more.
You're gonna add-
Oh yeah, we're gonna do as much to maintain the pristine nature after it's been, including going after the people dumping as well.
You might
Absolutely.
want to think about putting in a dash cam, catch those dumpers.
I would contact our detectives and they would do that, catch them. Absolutely.
I'll be happy to match up the hydrangea cutting from one end to the next.
That's perfect, thank you. I appreciate your help. Very good. As the project continues, we may do this again once we get to like a final design phase. I'm just thinking just out loud, probably before we go to construction, we'll probably schedule another public meeting just so all of our neighbors know when we start. This will have to be publicly bid and awarded leading up to a board meeting to be approved for contracts. So it'll be a very public process once we get that started as well, but we'll schedule another one just before construction.
So you're the design firm, but there's a different firm building.
Yeah, we'll have to put it out to bid for a construction firm to actually do the work, because it's over $18,000 out of it. So we'll have to put it out for a public bid, absolutely.
Casey, I have one more
Yeah,
question.
sure.
this is one of the 4 owned by the township. Is this pilot idea for the remaining, or are there other plans in place for the other basins?
Yeah, we actually did Bicking Basin, 5 years ago, it's been a while. We actually already retrofitted another basin, Bicking, right off of Bicking Road, in the south, off of South Concord Road. Check that out. We did that years ago, a small basin, but we used township staff, Parks Department, Public Works, and Streets Department.
So there's 2 left that are not retrofitted
Right.
at this point, after this is done.
Yep.
I don't know the impact at this point.
Not to do that.
But really, the idea here is to have a demonstration project for any basin.
Yes.
To show, some of the things that can be done. This is, the beauty of this basin is it's relatively large.
Yes.
So we're doing a lot of different things in different areas of the basin. They won't all apply to all basins. But you can pick this part and use it here, and pick this part and use it over here, and, spread it around. So we're trying to be as diverse here as we can. The other thing with the basin that we have in the community park, that's a multifunction field that's used for sports activities. So unfortunately, it doesn't lend itself to any of this type of retrofit, at least not at this point. But the other 3rd basin, most likely we'll probably retrofit that at some point in time.
Very good. All right. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.